Welcome to another episode of Until It's Done, a devoted podcast. I'm your host, Dana Lynn Kay. And I know you guys, I've been gone for a couple weeks now. We've had some family stuff going on, but now I'm back in the studio and I've got a really awesome special two-part series. It might even be more. Who knows? Because this could go on for a while. But I've got a cool series going on, and I've brought somebody real special into the studio with me to share some great stories. And I'm just going to cut to the chase. It's my dad. My dad his name is Joey. Dad, welcome to the show.
Hello.
And most of you know who followed the episode. I think this is like episode 37. So you've met my mom before. And whenever I talk about Devotion Nutrition and I talk about like how I got into the business and how it started, the evolution, I always say I'm third generation in the flavor industry. And my family, owns one of the largest privately owned flavor manufacturing companies. And I always talk about that, but a lot of you, yes, we've spoken about it on episodes before, but I'm sure some of you are still like, what the heck does that mean? How do you get into the industry? Growing up, when people would say like, oh, what does your dad do for a living? And I'd be like, oh, he sells flavors. It's like, okay, what does that mean? That I want to I said, Dad, you should come to the studio and let's tell everybody, let's go back and talk about it. And so this first episode, it's just going to be my dad and I think my mom's going to come for the second episode actually. And we're going to talk about how you get into the flavor industry and our family business. So Dad, let's first bring it back. How many years now have you been in the flavor industry?
Well, I've been in the industry over 40 years, and it is a third generation business. My father was a flavor salesman with a company for over 30 years. And then we teamed up when he kind of semi-retired. And after working for many flavor companies, I decided I can do this on my own. And I opened up Allen Flavors in 1990.
How did Grandpa, so my Grandpa Lenny, how did he get going in the flavor industry? Like, how does that even start? How do you even get into that?
Okay. Well, my father was in the Army and had just come home from World War II. And he answered an ad in the paper for a essential oil company. So he put on his uniform and went to the interview and really thought he was going to be selling home heating oil. But when he got there, he realized it was essential oils, lemon, orange, things that go into food products. And those things go into flavorings. So they offered him the job, and he stayed with the first company for 30 years. And the great thing about it is with the flavoring industry, the product you sell gets used up and it has to be reordered. So you're never making a sale once. You're constantly selling people what they need. And your customer is almost like your partner because you don't sell them a lot unless they sell a lot. So you try to be very close with the people you're dealing with, and you hope that your success and their success will all be together.
And Grandpa was great with that because he was a very good salesman. He was a real extrovert, right?
Right.
Yeah, he was good at being a great sales guy, and everybody loved him. So he built a lot of strong relationships in the industry. So he was selling flavors, and then you were in school, weren't you? You were more into sports and
right. I graduated college. First, I wanted to go to med school, but I didn't have the grades. So then I had all the science classes. So my advisor said, why don't you do health and phys ed and be a teacher? I said, all right, that sounds good. I didn't want to lose years of credits.
Yeah.
So I became a phys ed teacher. They put me back into I was like Welcome Back Kotter in real life. They put me back to my old junior high, and I taught there for 6 months. And I really enjoyed it. But then at the end of the 6 months, I went looking for a full-time teaching job, and they told me there's a 3-year waiting list in New York City to teach.
Oh, wow.
So I said, all right, I don't have 3 years to wait. And I went to my father and I said, why don't we join a flavor company together? You know all the accounts. You've been doing it for 30 years. I'm young. I'll run around and you'll point me in the right direction, and it should really work. And that's how
So he was your mentor.
Right. And that's how we started. But growing up, all he ever talked about was flavoring and accounts. And he took me with him from the time I was a little kid. So I really knew nothing else except.
So you were already teaming up with Grandpa with the knowledge that you had learned from him through the years of just kind of being his, he was your mentor. You listened to him talk about it forever, and you retained knowledge extremely well. So
yeah, I knew exactly who the accounts were. His company used to sell a lot of flavoring into the candy industry. So he would take me all over to these different candy manufacturers, the biggest one in Brooklyn being Topps Chewing Gum, who made the baseball cards. And he sold them the flavoring that went into the Bazooka gum. And every time we were done for the day, I'd go home with a box of baseball cards. So I was always thrilled. And it was enjoyable. It wasn't difficult. It was enjoyable.
Yeah. So at the time you weren't even considering that. I mean, if you were going to school for pre-med or then you went into the phys ed, it's like, had it ever dawned on you to do flavor sales?
No, I came up with the idea when they told me it was a 3-year waiting list. And I said, well, I can't do that. So I went to my father and I said, why don't we be a team?
But the phenomenal thing about you is that, it's because your personality is very different from how Grandpa Lenny's personality. Like I said, he was like always like he could tell stories and jokes, and he performed, right? He was an actor. He liked to be in the shows.
Always smoking, always with a cigarette in his hand. And he was like a stand-up comedian.
Right.
So every time we made a call, he always had a whole series of new jokes to tell. And
he was cut out for sales, and you're more like introverted, quiet. Like you weren't like this, like, hey, like get in front of everybody.
Right. I was the type that was always different than the classic salesman that he would hire. He would hire these very gregarious, outward guys that would drink a lot and, be very bubbly and tell jokes. And I was a much more serious type. But as it turns out now, that worked out well for me because I own probably the largest private flavor company there is in the world now.
Yeah.
And I've been doing it my whole career. I really don't do any other types of business. I stick with it. And my daughter's company, Devotion, is just another success story along the way.
Yeah.
And it shows that it takes a long time to make a product in the food or beverage industry. Dana's been doing this now for about 9 years, and it was a struggle, but all of a sudden now, everything seems different. The product's great, tastes great, and everybody wants to buy it. So patience. That
is something that I always say it's like survival of the fittest, and if you can hang in there and you have passion, believe in what you're doing. I mean, that's something that you've always had for your business. You're passionate about it. You could talk about the flavor industry forever. You stay on top of what's happening in the industry. It's really important to, the growth of the company of Allen Flavors has been phenomenal, which we'll get into how it kind of rolled. But you guys didn't start Allen until I was 12. So up until then, you worked as a flavor salesman for other companies.
Yeah, I put in 17 years with 3 different companies to really learn and hone the trade. And then one day I said to myself, my last company was just bought by a French conglomerate flavor company, and I really didn't want to work for them. And I figured I certainly know what I'm doing. Why don't I try this on my own? So I went to my wife at the time and said, we're going to put up our savings and we're going to do this thing. And I had 1 or 2 accounts that I knew would go with me. Smarties Candies, CD Candy, who makes Smarties Candies, was always a good friend of mine.
Yeah.
He said, don't worry, I'll always buy from you. And that got it started. Once I knew there was income from that account, which was a couple of $100,000 account, I knew I could last it out. And that's really how it started. Then flavored coffee became a big thing.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I went around to all the coffee roasters and started selling them flavoring to put on their coffee, like hazelnut and Irish cream and all the cordial type flavors. And so that was the second product line that I knew I could open up on my own. So started with candy flavors and coffee bean flavors.
And that's what you were selling when you were working for other companies? That's the type of flavoring that you were selling when you worked for these other...
Yeah, similar, but the companies I worked for were also very strong in the beverage industry.
Okay.
So that's how I learned the iced tea in the beverage industry, which turns out to be where I've had my biggest successes. I know how to put a beverage together, and I've done many very successful brands over the last 32 years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I would say. Is that how old Allen Flavors is now?
Yep.
32 years?
32 years old.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's why. So that's what it means whenever I say third generation, because it goes back to, my grandfather, and then you guys have heard about my mom being, she was a food scientist, and dad with flavor sales. So, it does take all of that experience and knowledge, because it's like, how do you just land yourself in a flavor company and then grow it? You need the years of experience and the contacts. Like you said, CD Candy wasn't that like one of the accounts from Grandpa, right? He was friends with.
Right. When you sell flavoring, nothing happens quickly. You have to develop a relationship with the company, whoever does their product development. And then it's a long series of going back, getting their confidence and becoming part of what they do. And selling somebody flavoring, especially if it's in a candy, is basically the most important thing of all, because if it doesn't taste right, no one's going to buy it.
Yeah. And so, okay, something that I always find, Dad and I will talk about this, and it's just where we are in 2024, being a salesman is way different than what it was like being a salesman when you were a salesman when I was a kid. I mean, when you're talking about being a flavor salesman in the 80s and 90s, what was that like? Because we didn't have smartphones, we didn't have GPS. You had to what was it like?
Well, most of the accounts were in the 5 boroughs of New York City, and the traffic was never as crazy as it is now. So on a given day, I could go to 4, 5, even 6 accounts.
Yeah.
Sit down with them. Usually I took one of them to lunch, and it was that's the way it worked. Nowadays, with the traffic and the way New York is, if you get to see 2 places in a day, it's a lot.
Yeah.
So, and then a lot of the bigger companies are frowning from flavor guys taking their people out to dinner and lunch and giving them gifts. So really, it's just a sales call to talk about the product and start a relationship.
Now, how many would you have to call on these companies many, many times before you would even, because would it be new products, or you were trying to get them to switch from their current flavor company?
Right. Well, switching came later on. Anybody who was already in the business had to be getting flavor from somebody.
Yeah.
So getting them to switch was always the second step along the way. It would take some time. You'd develop a relationship, and then they would decide they wanted to deal with you. You'd show them that you're going to show up all the time, because that was the main thing. And
then are you bringing samples with you?
Always bringing products. But a lot of times, if they're already in business, which they are, they'll give you a sample to duplicate. So you bring it back to your company. They run it through all these fancy equipment, gas chromatography and mass spec units. And then the printouts get handed over to a flavor chemist who has a myriad of products that he can put together to create the flavor. And most flavor companies have a library of well over 300 plus flavors.
Yeah.
Then you have the applications lab, where they take the flavor and apply it to whatever the finished product is. If it's a medicine, if it's ice cream, if it's a beverage, and that's a specialty in itself. Certain flavor companies gravitate to one area. When I started Allen, I said beverages is the thing I know the most, and I'm in the long range. They buy the most because a lot of people are thirsty and buy beverages. So that became my specialty. And iced tea became a product that I actually created, ready to drink iced tea.
Right. And you always said that it was like, even in times were like with the economy, it's an affordable luxury to be able to buy like a ready to drink. I mean, that's kind of felt like that was similar to devotion. I always thought of it that way. It's like, no, not everybody, you don't have to survive off, you don't have to have protein powder to survive, but it is a luxury. It's something nice that you can get more protein into your diet by buying this like product that tastes great. And it's the same thing with like, if you can't afford certain luxuries, you can certainly though still afford like a really good beverage at lunch. And it felt like, right? Isn't that what you said before?
Yeah. And the beverage industry especially has grown and changed so much in the 30 years. I mean, products are now mostly all natural. In the past, they used sodium benzoate and potassium sorbate to preserve the product.
Right.
But it gave you a burn when you were drinking. So Lipton iced tea, which was the first really popular ready-to-drink tea, never really tasted that good because you tasted the preservatives. Then
and why did they have to use preservatives? Because the way that it was packaged, right?
Yeah, it was packaged where it would last a certain amount of days, but then it would grow bacteria. So unless you killed all the bacteria, you needed the preservatives to do that until hot fill came along, where you took the beverage and you brought it up to 185 degrees, packaged it, and then you didn't have to worry. You could have a product that'll last a year, 2 years on the shelf. So that revolutionized the whole beverage industry.
Yeah, no kidding. And things started tasting a lot better. And so with the beverage industry also, like what was the popular, I mean, if there's no iced teas weren't huge, like what were the beverages that you were flavoring back then? What were the products that you were selling flavor for? Like if in the beginning of the beverage, you and I spoke about like the belly washes, like talked about that stuff.
Well, I started calling on the dairies, and the dairies had been going through a rough period because milk prices were frozen and they couldn't really make any money just selling milk. But I would show them a way they could make fruit punch, grape drink, orange drink, iced tea, flavored iced teas. And that became how they survived, because so many of them have told me if it was just for the milk, they would have had to have closed up.
Oh, so it was for the dairy. So the dairies.
Yeah,
and what were they packaging in? The same cartons?
Dairy cartons. So, it wasn't plastic. It wasn't glass. It was dairy cartons like you would get at school with your milk. And, it was the school systems were very big buyers of the stuff because, instead of giving the kids soda, they would give them iced tea, flavored iced tea, fruit punch. And a lot of schools went to contract for the stuff. They would buy it for the whole school system.
Yep.
And it was really the industry that I learned on was the dairy industry, mostly in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and New York. So I never had to really fly too many places. I drove everywhere, and there were dairies almost in every town because, you couldn't ship a liquid too far, and every kid needed milk. So there was like a dairy in almost every single town in Pennsylvania, Ohio,
and there was
New York.
this like all out in the boonies, like all.
Oh yeah, a lot of the places.
Oh my God, I would have been freaking getting lost.
Yeah.
So were you just using maps?
Maps. I used to have books and books of maps. There was no GPS. There was none of that.
Smart. If you had to call home, you had to stop and find a payphone.
Yeah,
right?
no ways. Yeah. Every time I got an order, I'd have to find a payphone to phone it in.
Oh my gosh!
It was a totally different.
No laptops. No,
it was a totally different world. It was.
You're being a salesman back then. Oh my God! Nowadays, it's like you don't have to leave. You'd be in your pajamas and do it from your bed.
I know. That's why everybody works from home, because with all these advances, technology wise, you can do it.
And you could even find things through Google. Like when I start to look for a new co-packer or I need something, it's like I just start searching co-packers. It's like back then you'd have to either, like, how did you get your leads? How would you even know who to call on? Who were the dairies?
All the industries had trade magazines.
Okay.
So the dairy had like 3 different magazines that they would advertise in. And then my company would take an ad in the magazine. And then we'd reprint the ad and send it out to every dairy, and they would learn that, this is iced tea,
right?
And it's something we could add to our line. So that's really how it started.
Yeah. I always tell people that, sometimes you have your dead, like their dad will come home and say, "Oh, this aftershave reminds me of dad. This cologne reminds me of my dad." My dad always smelled like cherry flavor. Like you'd come home from work, you were always wearing a suit because you were a salesman, but you always had like you smelled like flavor. It was
like bubble gum, or,
yeah,
banana, or whatever the flavor of the day was that I was bringing to the client.
Yeah.
Because flavoring is so strong that if you open the bottle, the sample, and you get any on your hands or clothes,
your car smelled like
it stays there for a long, long time.
Oh yeah. And then our garage at one point, I mean, you had like all kinds of different hustles to get, with flavor, where you start. I mean, just like a lot of small businesses, you guys you had flavors in the garage. It's like our house would smell like flavor. You walk into the garage and most garages smell like a lawnmower. Ours smell like flavors. And
a lot of the smaller companies or the larger flavor company did not want to sell small amounts of flavor.
Yeah.
So while I would spend my time calling on the General Foods, the Liptons, and the Biscos, the big companies, I would save the little companies and buy the stuff from my company, repackage it in the garage, and as small as 2 pounds.
Yeah.
And then sometimes I would then go deliver it to the roaster or somebody, a 2-pound bottle of flavor.
Yeah.
And flavoring goes a long way. Coffee bean flavor, usually 2 ounces does 5 pounds of beans.
Oh, which is a lot. That's good. Yeah.
Even a 2-pound order flavored up quite a bit of coffee for people, for the guys making it.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember when I went to University of Miami, I was driving by a coffee shop and I went in and I saw a flavor called Sinful Delight. And I was like, wait a second. I think my dad came up with that flavor. We sell that flavor. And then I asked them, like, where do you guys buy your coffee bean flavor from? They're like, oh, no, it's this company in New Jersey. And I was like, yeah, I think I know them.
Yeah. And then you would try to come up with fancy names for the flavors. Like I said, Sinful Delight.
Yeah. What was that for? That was like a chocolate caramel.
Yeah. Jamaica Me Crazy was another one.
Yeah.
And, and that made it like
novelty and fun
stuff.
Yeah. Coffee shops would change like their flavor of the week and then they would buy.
Some coffee places would have as many as 25 different flavors.
Yeah.
And then they would do a roast of the day. They would always roast the beans fresh, pour the flavor over the roasted beans, and that's how you'd get flavored coffee.
Yeah.
So, the main thing was the guy had to have a roaster.
Yeah.
Cold beans wouldn't work. He had to roast the beans. They were green coffee beans. He would roast them till they turned brown, cool it off, and then add the flavoring on top of the beans. Let it soak in, package it, and there was your flavored coffee.
Oh, wow. I don't even know that I ever knew that process. I mean, I'm very into flavor coffee. I love flavor. I love flavored everything. I don't know if it's a coincidence or whatever, but that's because when I did, when you guys started your business, I used to fill the little concentrate, the coffee flavor. And I remember we had the little sample boxes and we would send to the coffee roasters. Like, remember you had the little cutouts with the little samples and we would send them. I think we did like French vanilla and hazelnut and Irish cream.
Yeah. All the cordial flavors became very popular with the coffee.
Yeah.
So, amaretto, Irish cream, Bailey's Irish, all the ones that were popular in drinks became popular in coffee.
Right. Now, okay, here's a question, just going back a little bit. We use in the industry, I mean, you and Mom named the company Allen Flavors. That's not our legal last name. How did that come about? How did Allen or why did Grandpa use Allen? Because he was Lenny Allen in the industry.
Right. When my father went on his first interview after the Army, he sat down with the owners and they had some problems with anti-Semitism in the past. So they said to him, what's your middle name? He said, Allen. They said, okay, you'll be Lenny Allen from now on. And while he never wanted to change his name legally, he always went as Lenny Allen. So I knew when I joined up with him that I had to be Joey Allen.
Yeah.
And it's a nice, easy name to remember. You don't have to spell it for somebody. It just makes things nice and easy.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a question that everybody like people ask. I was like, where did that come from? That's not your guy's last name, but yeah, I like that story. And then we, we would then use it in the industry because then, for our company being Allen Flavors, and then if I introduce myself, it's like, oh, I'm Dana Allen. Oh, you're Joey Allen's daughter. Yeah, okay. Now it all makes sense. But, okay, so. Let's see. So, all right, iced tea's your specialty. I mean, we're going to go into all of that. Gosh, there's so much with this story. I mean, I think it's interesting. The thing is with Allen Flavors is you guys are always, I used to describe Allen Flavors as like the men behind the scenes. Like, the thing is about their company is you guys have never launched your own brand, like brought it. You are the manufacturer of the product. So the thing is the success of a product, I always say, is like the perfect storm. It has to be where not only does the product taste good, and that's what Allen brings to the table, and then you've got the brand owner who's coming to Allen saying, look, I've got an idea. Allen's obviously going to try to guide them. I mean, sometimes people come with ludicrous ideas, right? And you have to guide them like, no, that's too much caffeine, or this isn't going to work, or this isn't going to taste good. Sometimes they don't care. I mean, they'll just do it anyway. But, and then, they've got to market it, because you and I have been to trade shows where one year a company's doing great and we make them the most delicious product, and the next year they're gone because they just couldn't.
They didn't have the distribution taken care of. Like, I don't get involved in how a company distributes their product. I make it for them. They sign off on it. They say, this is great. And then how they get it out there, that's a whole nother segment of the business that flavor companies don't get involved with.
Right. So what would you say? So if an entrepreneur comes to you, because look, I've seen it a billion times. I mean, like you said, the family business has been around for 32 years. You guys started it when I was 12. Tomorrow I'll be 44. So it's like, we've been around it. We've seen brands come and go. We've seen some successes that have been like unbelievable. Some that have just had the staying power. I mean, look at companies like Smarties Candies. Who doesn't know what a Smarties candy is? And then some that are like fly by night. They come in, we think that'll be great, and then they're gone. What's advice that you would give to somebody who has an idea? We also hear, oh, my grandmother made the best whatever iced tea and it's delicious. I want to now put it in a bottle and sell it to everybody. Like, what's your advice to somebody who like thinks they've got the next greatest grandma's lemonade and they want to start?
Right. Well, if we think the product has merit, we have to be able to make it so it can be mass produced. Grandma made it in a pitcher in the kitchen. We have to make it where you make it like in 1,000-gallon tanks.
Right.
So it's a totally different thing. You could come close to making it taste like when you make one in your kitchen, but you don't want to sell one bottle of iced tea.
Right.
So you have to know how to scale the product. Most flavor companies have a whole division that does commercialization, where they know how to scale up a product. And we always try to convince people, don't make too much in the beginning, wait to see what happens, but have enough money that if the first run is successful, you have to have enough money to do it again. And that, unfortunately, is the down of a lot of companies, because they make a product, they sell it, it's great, but they don't have any money to do the next run. And then it goes by the wayside. So there's a lot to it. And every part of your chain has to work correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. So what do you think? So I know the number through the years has always changed. When you used to tell people, like, if they'd come to you, like, okay, you have to have at least this much to launch a brand. But now in 2024, the industry is so saturated. I mean, we've seen a spike in energy drinks where in the beginning there were a handful that were players. All of a sudden, it's like energy drinks were popping up like weeds. It was just like nuts. What do you think like the number is that an entrepreneur should have to start a legitimate brand in 2024 in a saturated industry where you have to separate yourself?
Well, you need to have seed money of at least $2 million.
Okay.
Then you need another $3 million if you're successful. If you're not successful, you're not going to make it again, and your money is whatever you collected from the first run is all you're going to get.
Yeah.
So you have to come to the table with financing.
Yeah.
If you don't have the financing, it's not going to work, especially now when there's just so many. You go into the beverage aisle of any supermarket and there are so many products.
Oh, yeah. It's a sea of product. It's overwhelming for the consumer.
Yeah,
I mean,
the
it's
convenience stores have so many products.
Yep.
They all want to sell the name product, and then they bring in a certain amount of not name products. And it's very difficult in this day and age now to launch a new product.
Do you see? I mean, I know we've had people come in with all kinds of ideas, like the hair tonics or like all these crazy ideas where people want to put everything into a beverage. I mean, do you think the ones that stay safe are the ones that are successful, or do you see ones that go out on a limb where you never thought that they would be? Now they're products that they put apple cider vinegar. They're products that it's like, is that like risky? And you're like,
there's always new trends, and everybody's always trying to be different than the next company.
Yeah.
So you're always coming up with what's the next thing that people are going to want.
Yeah.
And can I do it? Not everything that you think should go into a beverage, people make in large quantity. So you can't do that.
Yeah.
You can only do what's commercially available to put in your product. So, that's why I have beverage chemists that work for me that know exactly how to put a beverage together, know where to go to get the beverages. And we try to hold the client's hand all the way through until it comes to selling it. Then we say, that's up to you. It's your product. Figure out how to distribute it. Figure out how to sell it. I hope you did that already, but that's not my job. My job is for you to walk out with a great tasting product that can be made commercially.
Yeah. Now, being that I had the access to Allen flavors, obviously, I'll never forget. I didn't do things exactly like everybody else because I could literally just walk into the lab and I was like, I have this idea. And I was like already a consumer of protein, and I knew it was Allen hadn't done really any proteins before, but I was like, God, our flavors are so good. Like, I mean, we can make something that tastes delicious, because proteins were like, you had to hold your nose to drink them. I mean, they were really gross. I used to add orange soda to the protein. I used to do all kinds of crazy stuff just to get my protein down. And I didn't do things the way that like a normal person walking in as a customer would do. Like a lot of times Allen Flavor says, okay, what's your target price? We got to have a target. We got to have things like that the developers would work around. I didn't do that. I was just concerned with creating the best tasting, most amazing protein. And I'll never forget, I mean, when I finally came up with the formula, it was like this outrageous formula. I brought it to Dad. I think I visited you at your office in New York City. And it's like, if you don't pay attention to the pricing, you were like, what the heck are you going to sell this for? Like, right? So I didn't back into it. A lot of times, like the developers will say, like, okay, it's great you want to make this product, but it's what are you going to sell it for? You can't sell it for $10 a bottle, like if it's a beverage, or it's like So I didn't do that with Devotion. I wanted the highest quality, best tasting, blah blah blah, and I was, and I worked in the lab, and I mean that's what Devotion is today. And I don't know, people will comment. I mean, the truth is, and this is on the podcast we get to talk about, the truth is, I don't even charge what really Devotion should cost, because I do get a sweet family discount. But Devotion is really, really high quality. The flavors, everything is top notch. And that's why, when people say like, oh my gosh, it's so expensive, it's not even expensive as it should be. But I didn't, when I developed the product, I mean, usually, you have to, with a business model, you have to make sure that it all fits in correctly to cost is, because then that's another reason why I didn't have great distribution, because there was no margin left for the distributor to make, and all my numbers were off. I was just concerned in making the most delicious protein powder that ever existed.
Yeah, when we first made the product, I thought the only thing you do with protein is you drink it in a shake.
Yeah.
But the Devotion product can be used in so many different ways.
Yeah.
Baking.
The coffee creamer is pudding. It makes a pudding.
It makes a great pudding.
Yep.
And I never knew that. And now I see the reason that everybody loves it is it's got so many applications.
Yeah. And that makes it fun. People want variety. I mean, I think also that's why the flavor business does so well, is because the flavor variety is endless. I mean, working on the Hydroflex now, sometimes it gets overwhelming because Alan will send me so many versions of so many flavors. I mean, it's like, and people want variety, you know? And so flavor allows for that. I mean, you can have the same base being the protein or the Hydroflex, but you can have a cinnamon, you can have a caramel, you can have all the different ones. And that's what makes the flavor industry so fun. And what makes Alan different than other flavor, we're a flavor house, right? We can create flavors from scratch.
Yeah, we make every part of the flavor now from scratch. And the one thing you have to learn in the flavor business is flavor is subjective. So you can never tell anybody this is bad or this is good because it's different for everyone. You just have to guide them to not make mistakes. But you can't say, here, I have the best tasting so-and-so, because it may not taste that way to them.
Right.
It's all subjective. It's not black and white.
Yeah, it's true. Like, I think Devotion's best tasting protein powder ever, but, you know, I got to get everybody on board with that. But, I mean, you know, I think, you know, getting as close. I mean, we nailed the chocolate. There's not protein powders out there that taste like that, and chocolate and Alan. We had some great people. We had a man named Harvey Crone who was with Alan forever. He really helped me nail that angel food cake that people love, of delicious vanilla. You've put together people on your team who are really good at what they do,
right,
which is phenomenal. And some ingredients, you know, protein's hard to cover. I mean, with their ingredients, like even caffeine, it's bitter, it's hard to cover. So, you know, you can, you know, the product, sometimes it's like the flavor will taste great, but it's what's in the product that makes it like,
right.
And
everybody who's buying the product, they want it to taste good, but they want to get their protein out of it.
Right.
So it's, you know, you got to cover both bases.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Which Alan's been amazing at doing. And now with the trend, you know, we've done tons of energy drinks, hydration. But yeah, the protein we nailed. I mean, I think I'm very proud of the brand and what we've done. So, all right. So I think that this was look, we talked about how you got to where we are now with Alan. I know Mom is on her way. We're going to bring her in, and you guys are going to talk about being entrepreneurs. You guys are my parents. I always talk about you guys led by example. It's kind of like how I learned to do a lot of what I do, or as a business person. So we'll bring Mom in and we'll talk more about how you guys did what you did, because it's a pretty phenomenal thing. I call it like the American dream. It's been unbelievable. So thanks for being on this episode, Dad. This was really good.
Love being here.
Yeah. Yeah, this was really fun. And it gives you guys more of an understanding of the industry. And I think this episode is going to be really exciting for a lot of you guys to listen to.
Watching Dana's product just really start to grow now. It's really exciting. It took time, but everything good takes time. But now it's really coming out of the gate.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been amazing. I think, like I just said about some of their products, it's the perfect storm. It's like great product, great, you know, our marketing is great, and we've got a great following of people who truly are passionate about it, and it's all coming together. So it's been a lot of fun. We got a cookbook coming out. Dad got to see it.
Beautiful cookbook.
Yeah, sneak peek into the cookbook. That'll be launching soon. So we've got a lot of fun stuff coming our way. So thanks for joining us on this first episode, Dad.
My first podcast. And we will see you guys on the next episode of Until It's Done, a Devoted podcast.